Thank you, Chris. This is really a very tough duty to do, to introduce somebody who has been such a remarkable leader for our Commonwealth, somebody who is the definition of caregiver, something obviously important to all of us involved in the partners system. Charlie is a bit of a homie. He's obviously from the Commonwealth. He attended that little place called Harvard College as an undergrad. He did go off to Northwestern for his MBA, so he's seen a large part of the rest of the world. He has served in a variety of positions in both the private sector and the public sector. He served as the Secretary of Health and Human Services in prior administrations. He served as the CEO of major healthcare companies, first Harvard Vanguard and then as it became Harvard Pilgrim. He is an extraordinary individual in that he has this incredible knowledge of the healthcare space, looking at it again from both the public and the private side. He has focused on a broad range of activities that have been incredibly helpful to partners and other major institutions in our life science ecosystem in the Commonwealth. It is the ecosystem that I will humbly say is the most important, we believe, in the country and maybe in the world. And Charlie has been one of the great supporters of that in terms of the investments the Commonwealth has made, the support that he has provided from both his position as the governor, but also as an individual who has led efforts in a wide range of areas. He is one of the national leaders in opioid addiction and trying to deal with that horrendous problem and working with the private sector in order to mobilize resources for that. He is joined in these efforts to help and be a caregiver again in the Commonwealth by his wife, Lauren, who has also been a remarkable leader for the Commonwealth. When we think about the opportunities that we have to better serve patients across the world, utilizing technologies such as AI to bring the very high-end capabilities that we have at places like Partners to patients, both cost-effectively and geographically more broadly, it is important to have individuals like Charlie Baker as a leader of the Commonwealth and as one of the national leaders, both from a Governor's Association perspective, but also as an important voice advocating for the continued investment in life sciences and the recognition of the importance of things like investing in digital health, both to reduce the total medical expense of providing care, but also to increase the capabilities that we all have. So, Charlie, we're all very grateful to have you as our leader. As I said, this is really a hard task to introduce the individual who is the most popular governor in the nation and has been for about 5 years. I'm not sure what to attribute that to, probably again to Lauren, but yes, exactly. But welcome and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Scott. Let me just start, first of all, by congratulating the folks at Partners for putting together yet another amazing conference about a whole bunch of stuff I don't understand. And I also want to say to all of those who are here from outside Massachusetts, I know it's cold and rainy. It's April. It's what you get. Tomorrow is, however, opening day, so most of us are thinking we're about to turn the corner, and I hope you spend a lot of money during your time here in Massachusetts. As I listened to that presentation, a few thoughts occurred to me. You know, one of them is, and Scott mentioned this, I was the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the Secretary of Administration and Finance in previous administrations. I was the CEO of a big medical group practice and the CEO of a pretty large health plan. And I'm not a tech person, but I'm the guy who in many cases was in the position to make the go-no decision with respect to major investments in technology. And I've always found that if I took whatever the tech people were telling me and I divided it by about 10, I got to what was likely to happen with respect to the capacity to perform. And I know how excited they are about what they're up to and what they're doing, and that's great, because somebody should be. And they drive it as hard as they possibly can, and they set an extremely high bar with respect to what they think they can ultimately achieve in conjunction with their customers and others. But there's a whole bunch of operating entities that have to find a way to incorporate whatever the technology is into their business model. Or they have to take their business model and break it and remake it to fit with the nature of what that particular capability and new technology makes available. And people have to weigh those, and then they got to figure out the price tag associated with one or another, the context of the market they're in, what their competitors are up to, what their customers are looking for, and then how to make sure that they don't stumble terribly along the way. And I would argue in many cases, it's every bit as hard to do as the people who write the code. But most of the time, it doesn't get anywhere near the respect that it deserves. Now, I've gone through a whole bunch of these tech transfers over the course of my 40 years as a professional. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they're late and they work, and sometimes they simply don't. And what I would just say to all of you, especially because this is a healthcare community that we're talking about, for better or for worse, you all will be held to a higher standard by the public. And I'm not talking necessarily about government entities. I'm just talking about the public. Than other folks will be held to with respect to the way you deploy artificial intelligence. I mean, if you think a little bit about what's gone on with Facebook over the course of the past couple of years, it's just the hammer of public inquiry about how that open platform and the algorithms that were part of it were manipulated by some very bad people to achieve a particular outcome that they were pursuing. Or think about some of the hammers that have come down on other major enterprises in retail, financial services, public sector entities, because their platforms have been penetrated and people were able to cause some pretty significant heartburn for the customers, the employees, and others once they got inside. You're in the healthcare world. People think differently about what they expect from you than what they expect from a traditional retailer or a financial service organization or just about anybody else. Now, I'm a big believer in the deployment of technology, which is why I ended up on the right side and the wrong side of a whole bunch of initiatives over the course of my career. But I'm also a big believer in being realistic about both sides of the equation. The possibilities and the opportunity associated with a big investment and a new direction with respect to deploying technology, and what some of the unintended consequences and unknown implications could be of doing the same thing. And what you have to do most of the time, if you're on the operating side of this, is you have to figure out over and over again how to weigh those two possibilities. Then you will be held to a high standard. I think about all the data breaches that take place that involve financial service companies. They generate a lot of news, a lot of pounding of the table, and then people move on. They don't feel that way about their healthcare information. they expect more. So when you start talking about how you use algorithms in healthcare, especially when they're involved in the practice of medicine, my one piece of advice, as a guy who spent a lot of my career in both spaces, the public and the private, is I would really choose to focus, if I had a choice, on the places where artificial intelligence as a tool can make our organization smarter and can get us answers to questions that we think are important quicker. Now, for that to happen, the data that AI is going to process, it's got to be structured in a way where it understands it, and where if the data sets are different, it has the capacity to translate those differences and to make sure that when they get done with that exercise, they've made the adjustments to deal with the fact that in healthcare, as you all know, we still struggle with data definitions. And we struggle with how people input data, what they think is important, what they save, how they save it, what it's connected to, and how you access it. Now, I think AI has tremendous potential to do one of the most important things we need to do in healthcare, which is to help practitioners make really difficult decisions in an increasingly sophisticated, complicated, and powerful world of healthcare that are the right decisions for their patients and their families. I just came from Children's Hospital, and I went and visited a couple of clinical trials that were going on over there. I met a guy who just finished a series of treatments to deal with his sickle cell. He's in a trial. There are several other people in this trial. This thing could actually change his life and the life of everybody else who's dealing with that terrible, dreaded disease. And as I walked around and I talked to the docs who were involved in that and in a series of lymphoma patients that I talked to, the one thing I thought to myself was, you have to be so smart to be a clinician or a researcher. The amount of information that's available to you compared to what was available 5 years, 10 years, 15 years ago is mind-boggling. And AI has the possibility to help people wade their way through that stuff. So when they're making a decision about me, they can make that decision based on the thousands of people just like me who are about my age, who present with the same symptoms, or dealing with the same problem, the same circumstance, and give an answer that's not just me, but involves all of the me's that are part of that system's medical infrastructure. Now, I think this stuff is fascinating. It's powerful, and it's going to happen. But my advice to all of you is to recognize and understand that people in healthcare get held to a higher standard. That's just the way it is. And that's not a bad thing, because people believe in you, and they believe in what you're capable of and what you can do. When I was talking to the parents of those little kids at Children's, who are literally fighting like hell to save their kids, they all said they wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world than in that hospital, because they believe in the people and the institution. And it's really important, as you all think about this and incorporate it and figure out what the business model is and deal with the risks that come with new technology and new ways of doing what you do, Do you realize and remember the esteem in which you are all held? And the final thing I'll say is I'm a big believer in the old Bill Gates theory, which is nothing ever happens as quickly in a year as all the smart people say it's going to happen. And we always end up underestimating how far we get over a decade. Because you, the user community, will make adjustments, and your adjustments will affect the decisions that the tool makers make. And that is a really powerful combination, and I'm sure it will do great things. But you have a very significant challenge, and I would argue it's every bit as complicated as the challenge associated with creating the software that writes the software. And I just hope I'm alive long enough to benefit from your ability to deploy all this stuff to deliver higher outcomes and better results for really complicated people who are dealing with really difficult things. And thanks again for being here in the Commonwealth. Thank you.